April 15, 1943. The underground bunker of the British Admiralty. London. The air is thick with the stale smell of tobacco smoke and the monotonous hum of ventilation fans struggling against the subterranean humidity. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montagu rubs his tired eyes, staring intensely at a large, sprawling map of the Mediterranean pinned to the wall. The red lines of the front trace a path of victory across North Africa, but they stop abruptly at the water's edge. To the north lies the soft underbelly of Europe, yet it appears anything but soft to the intelligence officer. The silence in the room is heavy, broken only by the distant, muffled thud of a London bus passing on the street far above their heads. The strategic dilemma facing the Allied forces is terrifyingly simple and brutally obvious to everyone involved. With the North African campaign drawing to a successful close, the massive Anglo-American war machine needs a springboard to launch an invasion into the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. Geographically, the island of Sicily is the only logical choice. It sits like a massive, jagged football right at the toe of the Italian boot, serving as an unsinkable aircraft carrier that dominates the central Mediterranean. The problem is that the Germans know this just as well as the British do. Winston Churchill himself had gruffly remarked that anybody but a damn fool would know it is Sicily. Adolf Hitler and his high command are already reinforcing the island with concrete bunkers, heavy artillery, and elite panzer divisions. If the Allies attempt an amphibious landing against such prepared defences, the result will be a slaughter of catastrophic proportions, potentially rivaling the horrors of the First World War. The beaches of Sicily are set to become a killing ground that could stall the liberation of Europe for years. The Allies desperately need a miracle of deception. They need to convince the paranoid German leadership that the obvious target is actually a feint and that the real blow will fall somewhere else entirely, perhaps Greece or Sardinia. Inside the cramped and cluttered confines of Room 13, a small, secretive group known as the 20 Committee is tasked with this seemingly impossible objective. Their name comes from the Roman numerals for 20, the double cross, signifying their mastery of counter-espionage and deception. Among them sits Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, a tall, gangling man with an eccentric imagination and a mind that works in lateral loops. He watches Montagu with a look of suppressed excitement, having recently unearthed an obscure idea from the archives of British intelligence. It is a concept so macabre and bizarre that it had been dismissed as the fiction of a lunatic when it was first proposed. The original concept had come from the fertile mind of Rear Admiral John Godfrey and his personal assistant, a man named Ian Fleming, who would later find fame as the creator of James Bond. In a document known as the Trout Memo, they listed various ways to lure the enemy like a trout. Item 28, on that list, suggested planting misleading papers on a corpse that would be found by the enemy. The idea was to dress a body as an airman who had crashed at sea, carrying documents that revealed false plans. It was a plot device straight out of a cheap spy novel, yet in the desperate spring of 1943, fiction is the only resource they have left. Montagu and Cholmondeley refine the plan with the precision of diamond cutters, knowing that a single flaw will expose the entire ruse. They determine that a plane crash is too risky because the Germans might investigate the wreckage site or wonder why there are no other bodies. Instead, they conceive a narrative where a courier dies in a plane crash at sea, but his body floats for days before washing ashore. This courier would be carrying top-secret letters between high-ranking Allied generals, letters that casually mention an invasion of Greece. The beauty of the plan lies in its reliance on the German chain of command's efficiency. They are banking on the enemy intercepting the mail. The first and most gruesome hurdle is procuring the central prop for this theatre of the dead. They need a body. But not just any body. It has to be a male of military age, who appears to have died from drowning or exposure, with no visible wounds that would betray a different cause of death. Furthermore, this man needs to have no family who might demand the body for a funeral, and no history that could be traced by enemy agents in the United Kingdom. In the midst of a global war claiming millions of lives, finding one specific, suitable corpse in London proves to be a bureaucratic nightmare. Montagu turns to Bentley Purchase, the coroner of Sand, Pancras district, a man whose morbid humour matches the grim nature of his work. Under the cover of darkness, Montague meets Purchase in the sterile, cold atmosphere of the morgue. The coroner understands the gravity of the request immediately. He reveals that he has found a potential candidate, a man who had died in misery and obscurity. Completely alone in the world, this unfortunate soul is Glyndŵr Michael, a homeless labourer from Wales who had drifted to London and died after ingesting rat poison containing phosphorus. The choice of Glyndŵr Michael is chemically perfect for the deception. The phosphorus poison creates a condition in the lungs that is virtually indistinguishable from death by drowning, especially after the body has been in the sea for a few days. Even a skilled pathologist performing an autopsy would likely conclude the man had died in the water. It is a tragic end for Michael, a man who had lived a life of poverty and mental instability. But Montague sees a chance for redemption. In death, this forgotten drifter is about to be transformed into a hero of the British Empire, entrusted with secrets that will save thousands of young soldiers. With the body secured and kept frozen in the morgue, the conspirators begin the process of building a new identity. Glyndŵr Michael is dead. From his ashes rises Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They choose the Royal Marines for a specific, pragmatic reason. As a Marine, Major Martin would fall under the authority of the Admiralty rather than the Army, making it much easier for Montague to manage the paperwork and prevent questions from other branches of the service. Additionally, the battle dress of the Royal Marines is readily available and fits the narrative of an officer travelling for an amphibious planning conference. Montague and Cholmondeley spend hours debating the rank and personality of their creation. A rank too high would attract too much scrutiny and require a recognizable public figure. A rank too low would not be entrusted with such vital documents. The rank of acting major is selected as the perfect sweet spot. It suggests a man of responsibility and trust, someone who acts as a courier for the giants of the war effort, yet remains anonymous enough to have escaped the limelight. They are not just creating a soldier, they are writing a character for the most critical performance of their lives. The physical transformation of the corpse presents immediate and horrifying challenges. Rigor mortis and the freezing process make dressing the body in a uniform incredibly difficult. They have to thaw the feet of the corpse just to get the heavy military boots on. Every item of clothing has to be authentic, from the underwear to the trench coat. They cannot use brand new gear, as a seasoned major would have worn-in clothing. Montague even wears the trousers himself for a few days to create the natural creases and wear patterns of a living man. As they work, the weight of the operation presses down on them. If the Germans spot the deception, they will know for certain that Sicily is the real target. They will pour even more reinforcements into the island, creating a fortress so impregnable that the invasion might fail entirely. The failure of Operation Mincemeat would not just mean a wasted effort, it would mean the unnecessary deaths of fathers, brothers, and sons on the beaches of Sicily. Montague looks at the pale, frozen face of the stranger who is now Major Martin. Knowing that the fate of the Mediterranean campaign rests on this silent accomplice, the final piece of the physical puzzle is the identification card. A standard photograph of the corpse looks unmistakably like a dead man. The eyes are sunken, and the muscles are slack. They cannot use it. Instead, the team scours London for a living double, someone who resembles the dead Glyndŵr Michael, enough to pass a casual inspection. They eventually find a resemblance in a Captain Ronnie Reed, whose photograph is taken and carefully aged to look like a well-handled ID card. It is a tiny detail, but in the world of espionage, a single loose thread can unravel the entire tapestry. The stage is now set. Major William Martin exists in name, rank, and uniform, lying in a cold storage unit waiting for his mission. But a name and a uniform are not enough to fool the meticulous analysts of the German intelligence service. To make the deception truly sing, to make the Germans believe this man is real, they need to give him a soul. He needs a life, a history, vices, and a broken heart. He needs to carry the debris of a living man in his pockets. The next phase of the operation begins the creation of the pocket litter. The creation of Major William Martin requires more than just a corpse and a uniform. It demands the fabrication of a soul. Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley understand that the German intelligence officers who will eventually examine the body are meticulous, suspicious, and highly trained professionals. If the pockets of the dead man contain only official identification and secret documents, The setup will look staged. A real man carries the debris of his daily existence, the crumpled receipts, the forgotten notes, and the sentimental tokens that accumulate over a lifetime. The British intelligence team sets out to create this pocket litter with the obsessive detail of a novelist building a character. The first step in establishing Major Martin's humanity is to give him a romantic life, a vulnerability that transcends military rank. They decide that the Major has recently become engaged, a tragic detail that will make his death seem all the more poignant to anyone reading his personal mail. To provide the face of this fictional fiancée, named Pam, the team turns to the women of Mi-5. A young clerk named Jean Leslie is selected for her photogenic charm. A photograph of her, smiling radiantly in a bathing suit by the River Thames, is slipped into the Major's wallet. It is a snapshot of happiness that stands in stark contrast to the cold reality of the morgue. A photograph alone is not enough to sell the story. There must be words to accompany the image. The team needs love letters that feel authentic, capturing the mix of passion and mundane anxiety that characterizes wartime romance. They enlist the help of Hester Leggett, the most senior woman in the MI5 registry, to write as Pam. Leggett, a woman of great propriety, channels a surprisingly emotive voice, penning letters that speak of wedding preparations and the longing to see her Bill again. The handwriting is fluid and feminine, the paper slightly scented. These letters are folded and refolded dozens of times to mimic the wear of being read repeatedly by a lovelorn soldier. To cement the engagement narrative, the team adds a layer of financial reality to the Major's pockets. They visit S. J. Phillips, a prestigious jeweller on Bond Street, to acquire a receipt for a diamond engagement ring. The cost is set at £53, 10 shillings, and sixpence, a significant sum for a major, suggesting he is stretching his finances for love. This receipt is not just a piece of paper, it is proof of intent. It tells the German investigators that this man had a future he was actively planning for, a future that was cut short by the icy waters of the Atlantic. However, a character who is too perfect might arouse suspicion. So Montagu decides to give Major Martin a flaw: financial irresponsibility. He drafts a stern letter from Lloyd's Bank, demanding payment for an overdraft of roughly £79. The letter is typed on official bank stationery, complete with the correct date stamps and signatures. This mundane detail serves a crucial psychological purpose. It paints Martin as a man distracted by the war and his engagement, a man who is careless with his money. It is the kind of boring, bureaucratic trouble that a spy inventing a fake hero would rarely bother to include. Further deepening the family background, they forge a letter from Major Martin's father. The tone is distinctly Edwardian and slightly pompous, reflecting the attitude of an older generation patriarch. The letter discusses the family solicitor, complains about wartime rationing, and grudgingly agrees to help with the wedding costs despite his disapproval of the Major's spending habits. This document anchors Martin in a specific social class and family structure. It implies a history of father-son tension that adds yet another dimension of realism. The more the Germans read, the more they will feel they are invading the privacy of a real family. The team is careful to ensure that the timeline of the pocket litter matches the intended date of the flight. They procure ticket stubs for a London theatre show, strike a new note at the Prince of Wales Theatre, dated just a few days before the Major's departure. These stubs suggest that Martin spent his final nights in London enjoying the city's nightlife with his fiancée. They are placed casually in the pocket, as if shoved there after the usher tore them. Every item is subjected to friction, rubbed against cloth and surfaces to remove the crisp sheen of fresh paper. Personal vices are also accounted for to round out the physical profile of the man. A packet of senior service Navy-cut cigarettes is added to the inventory, along with a box of matches. These are the small comforts a soldier would reach for during a long flight or a moment of stress. The inclusion of cigarettes also subtly aligns with the autopsy findings if the Germans look closely at the lungs. As Glyndŵr Michael had been a smoker in life, it is a serendipitous alignment of the corpse's history and the character's fiction, adding a layer of forensic consistency that the British team welcomes. Keys are another essential element of the pocket litter, for no man travels without the means to return home. A set of keys is assembled, including a latchkey for a fictitious flat and keys that look like they belong to a car or an office. They are attached to a simple chain, the metal tarnished from use. Alongside the keys, they place a specialized identity disc, a dog tag specifically made for the Royal Marines. Unlike the Army discs, the naval versions are made of a fire-resistant material, a technical detail that a sloppy forger might have missed, but one that Montagu ensures is correct. One of the most debated items is the inclusion of a bill for a shirt from Geeves and Hawkes, the famous military tailor. The bill is for a new shirt, referencing the fact that officers often bought new kit before heading overseas. However, they decide against paying the bill, leaving it as another unpaid debt in his wallet. This reinforces the narrative of a man who is living slightly beyond his means. It is a subtle touch, but in the aggregate, these unpaid bills paint a consistent psychological portrait of a man who is disorganized but fundamentally decent. Montagu and Cholmondeley also consider the condition of the wallet itself. A brand new leather wallet would look suspicious on a seasoned officer. They spend days carrying the wallet around, sitting on it, and rubbing it against rough surfaces to simulate months of wear and tear. They insert and remove the photos and cards hundreds of times to loosen the leather pockets. The goal is to ensure that when a German officer picks it up, it feels warm and pliable, like an object that has been handled daily for years. The tactile experience must confirm the visual evidence. The final touch for the personal effects is a Saint Christopher medallion, the patron saint of travellers. It is a common gift for soldiers heading to the front, often given by worried mothers or lovers. Adding this small silver charm to the keyring, or placing it in the pocket, adds a note of superstition and faith. It suggests that someone was praying for William Martin's safe return, a prayer that went unanswered. This emotional hook is designed to make the German investigators feel a pang of pity, distracting them from the cold logic of forensic analysis. With the pockets filled, the team turns their attention to the most critical logistical problem, the briefcase containing the secret documents. In a real plane crash at sea, a courier might let go of a briefcase in the panic of drowning, or it might float away from the body. To ensure the documents remain with the corpse, they decide to use a security chain. This is a leather-covered chain that attaches the handle of the briefcase to the belt of the officer's trench coat. It creates a physical link that the ocean currents cannot break. The chain, however, presents a narrative problem. It is technically against regulations for officers to chain briefcases to themselves while flying, as it could trap them in a sinking aircraft. Yet, Montagu knows that many couriers ignore this rule for the sake of security. To justify the chain, they decide that Major Martin is a particularly conscientious and perhaps slightly nervous officer who prioritizes the safety of his documents above his own life. This decision aligns perfectly with the responsible courier persona they have built. The chain visually emphasizes the extreme importance of the cargo he is carrying. As the team surveys the collection of items spread out on the table, the letters, the wallet, the keys, the tickets, they realize they have done something profound. They have not just forged documents, they have resurrected a man. Glyndwr Michael is gone, hidden beneath the uniform and the backstory. In his place lies Major William Martin, a man with a fiancée named Pam, a father in the country, an overdraft at the bank, and a taste for theatre. He is now ready to carry the most dangerous secrets of the war, protected by the armour of his ordinary, fabricated life. With the physical vessel of Major William Martin meticulously constructed, the architects of Operation Mincemeat turn their focus to the payload itself. The body is merely the delivery system. The documents inside the briefcase are the weapon intended to shatter the German defensive strategy. Ewan Montagu knows that a set of official battle plans, complete with maps and timetables, would be instantly rejected as a clumsy plant by German intelligence. No officer of Martin's rank would carry the entire invasion strategy for Europe in a single bag. The deception requires something far more subtle, something that whispers the truth rather than shouting it. They need a document that feels private, indiscreet, and undeniably authentic. The solution lies in a personal letter between two of the highest-ranking commanders in the Allied forces. The team decides that the letter should be written by Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, the Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff in London, addressed to General Sir Harold Alexander, who is commanding the 18th Army Group in North Africa. A letter between such men would naturally bypass standard censorship and official channels. It would be a private and personal correspondence, the kind where generals discuss their true thoughts, frustrations, and strategic headaches without the polished veneer of official orders. This informality is the key to bypassing the skepticism of the German Abwehr. General Nye is brought into the fold to draft the letter himself, ensuring that the vocabulary and tone are perfectly consistent with his voice. The letter begins with a casual, clubby greeting, "My dear Alex," immediately establishing the close relationship between the two commanders. In the text, Nye discusses several routine matters to build credibility, including the appointment of new officers and the awarding of medals to American troops. These mundane details act as a Trojan horse, lowering the defenses of the reader before the critical disinformation is delivered. The genius of the letter lies in its apparent boredom. It reads exactly like the administrative maintenance of a massive war effort. Buried within this chatter is the lethal injection of false intelligence. Nye writes about the upcoming Allied offensives, explicitly naming 2 specific operations. He mentions that we have a very good chance of making him think we are going for Sicily. This is the masterstroke of the double bluff. By stating that Sicily is the cover story for the real invasion, the British are handing the Germans the exact narrative they want to believe. When the Germans see Allied ships gathering near Sicily, they will now interpret them as a feint designed to distract from the true targets. The letter then casually identifies those true targets, Greece and Sardinia. To reinforce the Greece narrative, Nye mentions that the 5th Division and the 56th Division are being held in reserve for the assault on Cape Araxos and Kalamata. These are specific, verifiable locations on the Greek coast that the Germans are already nervous about. By naming the divisions, the British are feeding the German appetite for order of battle intelligence. The letter implies that the Allies are stretching their forces to liberate Greece, a move that Hitler, with his romantic obsession with the Balkans, is already predisposed to fear. The deception is tailored to confirm the enemy's existing anxieties, making it psychologically irresistible. The second target, Sardinia, is introduced with a touch of dry humour that only a Briton could devise. Nye writes about a request from General Wilson regarding the cover plan, joking that we stand a very good chance of making him think we are going for Sicily. It is an obvious objective, and one about which he must be nervous. He adds a line about sardines being the catch of the day, a playful code that points directly to the island of Sardinia. This pun serves a dual purpose. It acts as a mnemonic device for the reader, and adds a layer of human wit that a forger would likely be too serious to invent. While the Nye letter is the centerpiece, a second letter is required to justify Major Martin's presence on the flight. Lord Louis Mountbatten, the Chief of Combined Operations, agrees to write a letter to Admiral Andrew Cunningham, the Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Fleet. Mountbatten is a high-profile figure known to the Germans, and his involvement adds significant weight to the package. In this letter, Mountbatten introduces Major Martin as an expert in amphibious warfare, who is being loaned to the theatre to assist with landing craft preparations. This provides a watertight reason for a Royal Marine Major to be flying from London to North Africa with high-priority dispatch. Mountbatten's letter also contains a brilliant, throwaway line to reinforce the main deception. He writes about the sardine joke, complaining that he hopes the target is not actually Sardinia because the Boche will be expecting it. This cross-referencing between the two letters creates a web of consistency. If the Germans intercept both documents, the separate mentions of the same strategic target by 2 different high-ranking officers will serve as mutual confirmation. It creates a closed loop of information that appears to be accidental, the kind of intelligence goldmine that spies dream of stumbling upon. The physical production of these letters becomes a matter of forensic obsession for Montagu and his team. They cannot simply type them up and put them in the briefcase. The ink must pass the scrutiny of a German laboratory. They consult with chemical experts to understand how ink dries and oxidizes over time. A letter written a few days ago looks chemically different from one written a few hours ago. To ensure the timeline holds up, the letters are written on the appropriate dates, allowing the ink to cure naturally before the mission is launched. They are leaving nothing to chance, not even the molecular degradation of blue-black ink. The folding of the letters is another detail that is debated with surprising intensity. If a general writes a letter and hands it to a courier, He folds it once to put it in the envelope. He does not unfold it and refold it repeatedly. Therefore, the letters in Major Martin's briefcase must have sharp, crisp creases, indicating they have not been read since they were sealed. However, the envelopes themselves must show some signs of travel. The team gently handles the envelopes, creating microscopic abrasions on the paper fibers that suggest they have been carried in a briefcase and shuffled around, rather than taken fresh from a stationery box. The briefcase itself is chosen with equal care. It is a standard-issue government black leather briefcase, the kind carried by thousands of civil servants and officers. It is not brand new, nor is it falling apart. It has the slight scuffs and scratches of a bag that has seen a few months of commuting. Inside, along with the golden documents, the team places the galley proofs of a book on the history of the Royal Marines. This adds bulk to the bag and provides a mundane reason for the Major to be carrying a briefcase in the first place. He needed something to read during the long, boring hours of the flight. Securing the briefcase to the body remains a point of contention. The chain they decided upon earlier is attached to the handle and will be looped through the Major's trench coat belt. This arrangement ensures that the briefcase and the body remain a single unit throughout the drift in the ocean. The key to the briefcase is not on the Major's person. This is a deliberate choice. If the key were in his pocket, the Germans might suspect he had opened the bag. By keeping the key absent, it implies the bag was locked by a superior in London and was intended to be opened only by the recipient in Africa. As the documents are finalized, the team conducts a final review of the text, hunting for any Americanisms or anachronisms that might betray their origin. The language must be strictly British, utilizing the specific slang and abbreviations of the upper-class officer corps. Phrases like old boy and bringing you into the picture are vetted for authenticity. They are simulating a specific dialect of power and privilege, a language that the German intelligence analysts in Berlin have studied extensively. Any slip in idiom could cause a catastrophic loss of confidence in the document's validity. The photographs of the letters are taken as a precaution, in case the originals are lost or need to be reproduced. The tension in room 13 rises as the deadline approaches. They are sending a man who never existed, armed with lies written by real generals, to change the course of history. The letters are sealed in their envelopes, stamped with the wax seals of the respective headquarters. They are no longer just paper. They are a death warrant for the German defences in Sicily. Provided the enemy swallows the bait, the package is now complete. A lethal narrative waiting to be read. With the body prepared and the documents secured, the operation moves from the theoretical to the kinetic. The frozen Major needs to be transported from the morgue in London to the submarine that will launch him into destiny. This requires a specialized canister to keep the body cold and preserved during the journey. They design a tubular steel canister with a double skin, the space between filled with dry ice. It looks ominously like a bomb or a torpedo, a fitting shape for a device designed to blow a hole in Hitler's fortress Europe. The team arranges for a van to transport the canister to Scotland, where the submarine HMS Seraph is waiting. The driver is Sand, John Jock Horsfall, a racing driver known for his speed and discretion. The journey north is fraught with the anxiety of the unknown. They are trafficking a corpse across wartime Britain, a secret so sensitive that even the submarine crew cannot be told the truth. The stage shifts from the smoke-filled rooms of the Admiralty to the cold, grey waters of the Holy Loch, where the final act of the launch will take place. The final leg of Major Martin's journey begins not on water, but on the asphalt of a darkened British road. In the pre-dawn gloom of April 17, 1943, a plain Ford van speeds north toward Scotland, driven by the racing champion Saint-Erve. John Jock Horsfall. In the back of the rattling vehicle, Ewan Montague and Charles Cholmondeley sit in uncomfortable silence, accompanying a large, tubular steel canister. The container is labelled "Handle with Care Optical Instruments," a mundane description for a vessel holding a frozen corpse destined to change the course of the war. Horsfall drives with a blend of urgency and precision, navigating the blacked-out country roads as if he were on a racetrack, knowing that the submarine HMS Seraph cannot wait for stragglers. Upon arriving at Holy Loch on the Scottish coast, the team is met by the grey, rain-swept silhouette of the submarine fleet. The canister, weighing nearly 400 pounds due to its double-skinned steel and dry ice lining, presents an immediate logistical headache. It is too heavy to be manhandled easily down the narrow hatches of a combat submarine. The crew of the Seraph, watching from the deck, are told that the canister contains classified meteorological equipment that must remain kept at a specific temperature. Only the submarine's commander, Lieutenant Bill Jewell, knows that the weather instruments are actually a dead Welshman dressed as a Royal Marine. Loading the canister onto the Seraph requires a crane and a delicate touch, as a slip could dent the casing, or, worse, crack it open and reveal the gruesome contents to the uninitiated sailors. The canister is finally maneuvered through the torpedo loading hatch, the only opening wide enough to accommodate its bulk. It is secured in the forward torpedo room, a cramped space smelling of diesel oil, wet wool, and confined humanity. For the crew, the presence of this large, mysterious object becomes a source of rumor and speculation. But military discipline keeps their questions to a whisper. Major Martin is now effectively a passenger of the Royal Navy. The voyage south is a test of nerves for Lieutenant Jewell. The Seraph is an S-class submarine, a vessel designed for stealth and violence, not for cargo transport. As they navigate through the Irish Sea and down into the Bay of Biscay, the boat is subjected to the terrifying reality of submarine warfare. They are hunted by German patrol aircraft and have to endure the bone-rattling concussions of depth charges dropped by nervous enemy destroyers. Through every crash, dive, and every tense moment of silence, the canister sits ominous and heavy in the bow, a constant reminder of the strange mission that risks all their lives for a single dead man. The destination for this macabre delivery is a specific point off the coast of Spain, near the town of Huelva. The location has been chosen with the same obsessive calculation as the pocket litter. The tides in the Gulf of Cadiz are known to run strongly toward the shore, ensuring that any flotsam released at the right spot will drift onto the beaches of Punta Umbria. Furthermore, Huelva is a hotbed of German espionage, home to an active and highly efficient German vice-consul named Adolf Kloss. The British are counting on Kloss's network to alert Berlin the moment a British officer washes up with a briefcase attached to his belt. On the night of April 30, 1943, the Seraph arrives at the designated coordinates. The sea is calm, and the moon is obscured by cloud cover, providing the darkness necessary for a covert surfacing. Lieutenant Jewell orders the submarine to rise to trim, bringing the casing just above the waterline. The order is given to clear the lower decks, ensuring that no junior ratings are present to witness the final act. Only the officers, who have been briefed on the operation, remain in the torpedo room. The atmosphere shifts from the routine of patrol to the solemnity of a funeral rite. The canister is unbolted from the floor and manhandled toward the hatch. The dry ice has done its work, keeping the body frozen for the 10-day journey. But now the seal must be broken. As the bolts are removed, the officers brace themselves for the smell of decomposition. But the cold has preserved Glyndwr Michael remarkably well. The lid is lifted, and for the first time since leaving London, Major William Martin is exposed to the salt air. The officers work quickly to extract the body, struggling with the dead weight of the frozen limbs in the confined space of the hatchway. Once the body is on the deck, the scene takes on a surreal quality. The submarine rocks gently in the swell, the water lapping against the steel hull just inches from their boots. Jewell and his officers perform a final equipment check under the dim glow of red flashlights. They verify that the briefcase is securely chained to the trench coat belt and that the key is missing. They check the pockets one last time to ensure the wallet and letters are in place. The Major is stiff, his face pale and waxy, looking every bit the victim of a tragic air disaster at sea. The next step is to inflate the Mae West life jacket worn over the trench coat. This is a crucial detail. If the Major had died in a crash, he would have likely deployed his flotation device. However, because the body is still partially frozen, the jacket sits awkwardly on the stiff frame. The officers have to manipulate the corpse, wrestling with the rigidity of death to ensure the life vest looks natural. It is a grim, physical task that contrasts sharply with the respectful silence of the night. They are dressing a prop, yet they are also handling a human being who deserves a measure of dignity. Before the body is committed to the deep, Lieutenant Jewell pauses the operation for a brief moment of spiritual observance. He opens his prayer book and reads the 39th Psalm. The words are whispered into the wind. A quiet benediction for the man who died as a homeless vagrant and is now being buried as a hero of the empire. I held my tongue and spake nothing. I kept silence. Yea, even from good words, but it was pain and grief to me. It is the only funeral Glyndŵr Michael will ever receive. Conducted by a ring of submarine officers on the deck of a warship in enemy waters. With the service concluded, the moment of release arrives. Jewel checks the current one last time, observing the drift of the water toward the distant, dark outline of the Spanish coast. He gives the nod, and the officers lift the body of Major Martin. They gently slide him over the side of the submarine. Watching as the black water takes him, the inflated life jacket buoys him up, and the current immediately catches the form, pulling it slowly away from the hull. The Major bobs in the swell, a lonely figure beginning his final drift toward the sands of Punta Umbria. To complete the illusion of a plane crash, the crew launches a rubber dinghy. This is another piece of litter designed to explain why the body was floating. They inflate the raft but do not put anyone in it, instead turning it upside down to suggest it had capsized in rough weather or during a bad landing. The dinghy drifts away near the body, a silent companion in the deception. The narrative is now physically complete: a downed courier, a failed life raft, and the Atlantic Ocean claiming its toll. The stage is set for the Spanish fishermen to make their discovery in the morning light. The final task is to dispose of the evidence, the steel canister. It cannot be brought back to Britain, nor can it be left to float. The officers push the heavy tube over the side, expecting it to sink immediately due to its weight. However, the air trapped inside the double skin acts as a buoy, and the canister stubbornly refuses to submerge. It bobs on the surface, a metallic refusal to disappear. Panic flares momentarily. If the canister washes ashore with the body, the entire game is up. The Germans would realize the man had been transported in a container, not an airplane. Jewel considers shooting the canister to sink it, but the gunfire might alert coastal sentries. Instead, he maneuvers the submarine, using the wash of the propellers to try and swamp the container, but it remains buoyant. Finally, they realize the canister has a plastic explosives charge fitted for scuttling, but setting it off is too risky this close to shore. In a desperate physical effort, the officers lean over the side and manage to flood the container manually, waiting until it gurgles and finally slips beneath the waves. It plunges into the depths of the Atlantic, taking the secret of the optical instruments with it forever. With the deck cleared and the Major drifting toward his destiny, Jewel orders the Seraph to clear the area at full speed. They dive deep, vanishing into the safety of the ocean depths before the sun can reveal their presence. Once they are safely away in international waters, Jewel breaks radio silence to send a coded signal back to the Admiralty in London. The message is short, cryptic, and triumphant: mincemeat completed. In the smoky basement of room 13, Montague and Cholmondeley can finally exhale. The bait is in the water. Now they must wait to see if the shark will bite. The sun rises over the Atlantic on the morning of April 30, casting a pale, golden light on the sleepy fishing village of Punta Umbria. The rhythm of the waves is broken only by the splashes of oars as local fishermen return with their nightly catch of sardines. Among them is José Antonio Rey Maria, a man whose daily routine is defined by the sea and the struggle for subsistence. As he scans the water, his eyes catch something unusual bobbing in the surf, a shape that does not belong among the driftwood and foam. It is a human form, face down, dressed in the heavy, sodden trench coat of a soldier, the life jacket creating a strange hump on its back. José maneuvers his small boat toward the object, fear mixing with curiosity as the reality of the discovery sets in. He reaches out with a gaff hook, snagging the fabric of the coat to pull the heavy, waterlogged mass alongside his vessel. The body is undeniably dead, the skin grey and bloated from its time in the water, but the uniform marks him as a man of importance. As José hauls the corpse toward the beach, he notices a black briefcase attached to the dead man's belt by a chain. To a simple fisherman, this detail signals mystery and authority, suggesting that this silent passenger carries something far more valuable than the contents of a typical soldier's knapsack. Word of the discovery spreads through the village like wildfire, drawing a crowd of curious locals and the inevitable attention of the authorities. The body is loaded onto a donkey cart, a humble hearse for an officer of the Royal Marines, and transported to the nearby city of Huelva. The Spanish officials who take custody of the body are a mix of local police and naval officers. Men who navigate the precarious neutrality of Franco's Spain. They are technically neutral, but their sympathies and their fears often lean toward the seemingly invincible German war machine. The arrival of a dead British officer is a diplomatic grenade that has just landed in their lap. Entering this volatile scene is Francis Haselden, the British vice-consul in Huelva. He is a man of mild manners and considerable charm, a retired engineer who runs the local limestone quarry. To the Germans, he appears to be a harmless, slightly bumbling old man, but in reality, he is a shrewd operator trusted implicitly by British intelligence. Haselden has been briefed to expect the body, but he must play the part of a distressed official who is shocked by the tragedy. He arrives at the morgue with a singular, contradictory goal. He must demand the return of the briefcase while ensuring the Spanish do not hand it over immediately. The autopsy is conducted by Dr. Eduardo Fernandez del Torno, a respected local pathologist. In the stifling heat of the Huelva cemetery morgue, the room smells of formaldehyde and the sea. Haselden watches anxiously as the doctor examines the body. The success of the entire operation hangs on this medical examination. If the doctor finds the rat poison or determines the body has been frozen, the ruse collapses. However, the phosphorus poison has done its work, filling the lungs with fluid that mimics seawater drowning. The doctor, sweating in the heat, concludes that the man was alive when he hit the water and died of asphyxiation by immersion. He signs the death certificate, unwittingly sealing the deception's first layer of truth. While the body is being examined, the real battle begins over the black briefcase. Haselden makes a show of trying to collect Major Martin's effects, but the Spanish naval judge, eager to follow protocol and perhaps ingratiate himself with his superiors, insists that everything must be impounded for review. Haselden feigns frustration, but secretly breathes a sigh of relief. If he had secured the documents immediately, the Germans would never have seen them. He needs the Spanish bureaucracy to do exactly what it does best: delay, process, and leak information to the highest bidder. The briefcase is locked away, but the whispers about its existence are already drifting toward the German consulate. The German Abwehr operates a highly efficient station in Huelva, led by the formidable Adolf Claus. Claus is the son of the German consul and operates with the impunity of a man who knows his side is winning. He has an extensive network of informants in the police and the port authority. It does not take long for the news of the man who never was to reach his ears. He learns of a British courier, a plane crash, and, most importantly, a briefcase chained to the body. Claus smells blood. He immediately contacts his superiors in Madrid, setting in motion a frantic diplomatic pressure campaign to get a look at those documents. In Madrid, the British naval attaché, Captain Alan Hilgarth, takes over the role of the antagonist in this psychological play. Hilgarth is a man of sharp intellect and commanding presence, who understands the Spanish character perfectly. He begins to bombard the Spanish Ministry of Marine with demands for the return of the briefcase. He emphasizes that the documents are government property and of great importance, implying that a diplomatic incident will occur if they are tampered with. His aggression is calculated. He knows that the more he demands the return of the bag unopened, the more the Spanish will believe that the contents are vital, and the more likely they are to let the Germans take a peek. Caught between the shouting of the British and the whispering of the Germans, the Spanish authorities are paralyzed by indecision. Admiral Moreno, the Spanish Chief of Staff, wishes to maintain the honor of neutrality, but the German influence in Madrid is suffocating. Karl Erich Kuhlenthal, the senior Abwehr officer in Spain, is desperate for a victory. He has been feeding Berlin a steady diet of exaggerated intelligence to bolster his own standing, and he sees the Martin briefcase as the coup that will secure his career. He leans heavily on his contacts in the Spanish secret police, particularly a Colonel José López Barón, to facilitate a covert inspection. The pressure finally cracks the Spanish resolve. Under the guise of an official investigation to determine the identity of the deceased, Colonel Barron arranges for the briefcase to be opened in a secure room at the majestic headquarters of the Spanish Navy. The operation is conducted with the stealth of a bank heist. The Spanish experts, working alongside German sympathizers, are tasked with extracting the letters without breaking the wax seals. They use a technique involving a thin, split reed or a winding tool, inserted through the flap of the envelope. By carefully rolling the paper around the tool, they can extract the sheets through the narrow gap without disturbing the red wax impressions of the British crests. The atmosphere in the room is electric with tension as the wet, salt-stained pages are unfurled. The paper is fragile, threatening to disintegrate if mishandled. They have to dry the documents rapidly but carefully to make them legible and to ensure the ink does not run. Fans are used, and the letters are pressed between sheets of blotting paper. The Germans watch with bated breath as the handwriting of General Nye and Lord Mountbatten is revealed. They photograph every page, every envelope, and even the theatre tickets and the photo of Pam. They are convinced they are looking at the raw, unfiltered strategic thinking of the Allied High Command. As they read the contents, the confirmation bias of the German intelligence machine kicks into overdrive. The references to Greece and Sardinia confirm everything Hitler has been saying for months. The casual joke about sardines strikes them not as a plant, but as the careless wit of arrogant British generals. The fact that the letters are personal, rather than official orders, makes them seem all the more authentic. They believe they have stumbled upon the gold dust of intelligence inadvertent disclosure. The Germans rush to translate the texts and prepare urgent cables for Berlin, believing they have unlocked the secret to the upcoming Allied invasion. The reinsertion of the documents is a surgical procedure even more delicate than the extraction. The letters must be rolled back up, slid into the envelopes, and flattened out to look as if they had never been touched. The Spanish specialists work with the precision of art restorers. They rehydrate the paper slightly to make it pliable, insert it back into the envelopes, and then press the flaps shut again. They even take care to resalt the paper to mimic the condition in which it was found. To the naked eye, the letters look exactly as they did when they were pulled from the dead man's pocket. The briefcase is locked, the keyless lock serving as a final testament to its security. With the deed done, the Spanish authorities officially accede to Captain Hilgarth's demands. On May 13, nearly 2 weeks after the body washed ashore, the briefcase is handed over to the British Embassy in Madrid. Hilgarth receives it with a performance of immense relief, acting as though a catastrophe has been averted. He immediately arranges for the briefcase to be flown back to London in the diplomatic bag. Meanwhile, in Huelva, Major William Martin is laid to rest in the cemetery of Our Lady. The British vice-consul places a wreath on the grave, a final gesture of respect for a man who is both a fraud and a hero. The inscription on the gravestone is simple, hiding the complex lie buried beneath the soil. Back in London, the briefcase arrives in the basement of the Admiralty. The team in room 13 waits with agonizing suspense. They do not yet know if the Germans have taken the bait. The documents are sent to the forensic laboratory for analysis. The scientists examine the wax seals for microscopic fractures and the paper fibers for signs of mechanical stress. They are looking for the telltale signs of the Spanish extraction method. The verdict comes back: the paper fibers have been damaged, and the envelopes show signs of having been wetted and re-dried. The seals are intact, but the contents have undoubtedly been accessed. A message is sent to Winston Churchill, who is in Washington, mincemeat swallowed whole. The deception has moved from the shores of Spain to the desk of Adolf Hitler. The intelligence harvested from the salt-stained documents of Major Martin travels with electric speed from the sunny courtyards of Madrid to the grey, imposing heart of the Third Reich. The photographs of the letters, now stamped with the highest classification of secrecy, land on the desks of the Abwehr headquarters at the Tirpitz-Ufer in Berlin. This is the nerve center of German military intelligence, a place where skepticism is a survival trait and paranoia is standard operating procedure. The analysts here are men who have spent years sifting through lies, double agents, and radio misdirection. They approach the Martin cache with their scalpels out, ready to dissect every phrase and every comma for a hint of betrayal. The man responsible for the final verdict on the documents is Baron Alexis von Roen, the head of Fremde Heere West, or Foreign Armies West. He is a brilliant analyst, a man of aristocratic bearing who serves a regime he privately despises. Von Rohen is the gatekeeper of truth for the German High Command. If he validates the intelligence, it becomes fact. He studies the letters with an obsessive intensity, looking for the telltale signs of a plant. He considers the possibility of a deception, noting that the find is almost too perfect, too convenient in its timing. Yet, the sheer volume of corroborating details, the pocket litter, the dates, the personal tone of the generals begins to erode his professional doubt. What truly seals the deception is the confirmation bias that pervades the German strategic outlook. Hitler has long been obsessed with the Balkans, fearing that the Allies will strike at Greece to cut off Germany's supply of copper, bauxite, and chrome. The documents in Major Martin's briefcase do not challenge this worldview. They confirm it with terrifying clarity. When von Rohen reads the casual references to the invasion forces gathering for Greece, it aligns perfectly with the scattered reports coming from agents in the Middle East. The lie is wrapped in the skin of a truth they were already desperate to believe. Von Rohen issues his assessment. The documents are genuine. The intelligence dossier travels from Berlin to the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's claustrophobic headquarters buried deep in the forests of East Prussia. The atmosphere here is one of suffocating tension, dominated by the erratic moods of the Führer, Generals Keitel and Jodl, the sycophantic chiefs of the armed forces, present the findings to Hitler. They lay out the map of the Mediterranean, pointing to the feint at Sicily mentioned in the Nye letter. They explain that the British are clumsy enough to have lost a courier and that the sardine joke is typical of their arrogance. For the staff at the Wolf's Lair, the discovery is treated as a divine intervention, a stroke of luck that will allow them to crush the Allied invasion before it gains a foothold. Adolf Hitler reads the translated summaries with a growing sense of vindication. He has never trusted the Italians, and he has always suspected that the British would try to open a second front in the Balkans to link up with the Soviet forces advancing from the east. The documents provide the concrete proof he needs to silence his detractors. He ignores the geographical logic that points to Sicily as the only viable target for air cover. In his mind, the Allies are planning a complex, multi-pronged operation to encircle his southern flank. The man who never was has successfully whispered into the ear of the most powerful dictator on earth, and the dictator is listening. The strategic consequences of this belief are immediate and catastrophic for the Axis defense plan. On May 12, Hitler issues a directive that fundamentally alters the disposition of his forces. He declares that the measures regarding Sardinia and the Peloponnese take precedence over everything else. He explicitly states that the enemy's discovery of the documents has revealed their true intentions. In a supreme irony, Hitler believes he has outsmarted the British by seeing through their cover story of Sicily. He orders the reinforcement of Greece and Sardinia to turn them into death traps for the Allied landing forces that will never arrive. The most significant and tangible victory for the deception involves the movement of the 1st Panzer Division. This is one of Germany's premier fighting units, a veteran armoured division stationed in France to refit and recover. It is a strategic reserve that could have wreaked havoc on the beaches of Sicily. Instead, Hitler orders the entire division to load onto trains and travel all the way across Europe to the Greek city of Tripolis. The logistics of moving hundreds of tanks, trucks, and thousands of men consume precious fuel and rail capacity. The 1st Panzer Division is effectively removed from the war for weeks, sent to guard a coastline where the only enemy is the sea breeze. The deception also distorts the German command structure. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the celebrated Desert Fox, is recalled from leave and appointed to command the defense of Greece. His presence is intended to bolster the morale of the troops and signal to the Allies that Germany is ready for them. By sending their best tactical commander to Athens, the Germans are leaving the actual battlefield of Sicily in the hands of lesser commanders and the demoralized Italian army. The British have not just moved pieces on a board, they have successfully displaced the enemy's queens and knights to squares where they can do no harm. While the Germans are busy pouring concrete and laying minefields on the beaches of Sardinia and Greece, the British are watching the reaction unfold in real time. This is the unique advantage of the Allied intelligence war. They not only plant the lie, but they can also verify if the enemy believes it. Through the top-secret Ultra program at Bletchley Park, British codebreakers are intercepting and decrypting the Enigma radio traffic of the German High Command. They read the orders sending the Panzer divisions east, They see the frantic strengthening of the Greek garrisons. Every intercepted message is a confirmation that Major Martin is doing his job from beyond the grave. In the subterranean war rooms of London, the mood shifts from anxiety to cautious jubilation. Winston Churchill is informed of the success via a cryptic message that reads, "The swallows have flown." This confirms that the false intelligence has reached the highest levels and has been acted upon. The Prime Minister, who had delighted in the macabre creativity of the plan from the beginning, sees the validation of his unconventional warfare philosophy. They have managed to defend the invasion fleet not with ships and guns, but with a dead body and a typewriter. It is a triumph of imagination over steel. Meanwhile, in Rome, Benito Mussolini remains unconvinced. The Italian dictator, looking at the map from his own precarious position, argues passionately that Sicily is the only logical target. He begs Hitler to send reinforcements to the island, sensing that the blow will fall on his own territory. But Hitler, armed with the indisputable evidence from the briefcase, dismisses Mussolini's fears as the panic of a failing ally. He lectures the Duce on the subtleties of British strategy, insisting that Sicily is merely a diversion. The rift between the Axis partners widens, fueled by the silence of a dead man. The scale of the German redeployment is staggering. By late June, the number of German divisions in Greece has risen from 1 to 8. They move flotillas of torpedo boats, lay miles of anti-tank obstacles, and install heavy coastal batteries overlooking empty bays. They strip the Russian front of vital aircraft to cover the Aegean Sea. Every soldier sent to stand guard in the olive groves of the Peloponnese is a soldier who will not be manning a machine gun in the hills of Sicily. The Germans are fortifying a ghost front, preparing for a battle that exists only in the mind of their leader. As the date for Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, approaches, the Allies maintain their radio silence and deception protocols. They continue to bomb targets in Greece and Sardinia to reinforce the illusion. They conduct naval feints near the Greek islands, triggering air raid sirens and panic in the German garrisons. Every bomb dropped on a fake target is a calculated investment in the safety of the real landing force. The deception has bought the most valuable commodity in war: surprise. The massive Allied armada begins to gather in the ports of North Africa, a coiled spring ready to release its energy against the soft underbelly of Europe. In the final days before the invasion, the German intelligence apparatus remains fixated on the wrong locations. They interpret the gathering of ships in the Mediterranean as the prelude to the Greek landing. Von Roen produces updated assessments confirming the threat to the Balkans. The Abwehr agents in Spain and Turkey continue to feed confirmational noise into the system. The trap is shut tight. The Germans are looking east, their binoculars trained on the horizon of the Aegean. While the hammer is poised to fall in the central Mediterranean, the stage is set for the largest amphibious landing in history up to that point. Thousands of young Americans, British, and Canadians are boarding their transport ships, writing their final letters home, and checking their rifles. They do not know that a homeless Welshman named Glyndwr Michael has already gone before them to clear the way. They do not know that the Panzer Division that should have been waiting to drive them back into the sea is sitting idly on a train in Greece. The deception is complete. Now, the reality of war must take over. The night of July 9, 1943, brings a tempest to the Mediterranean that threatens to shatter the Allied invasion plans before they even begin. A fierce gale whips the sea into a frenzy, tossing the landing craft like toys and turning the stomachs of thousands of soldiers. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, watching from his command post in Malta, agonizingly considers postponing the operation. However, the storm proves to be a final, unintended ally in the deception. On the island of Sicily, the Axis commanders look out at the churning whitecaps and relax, convinced that no sane enemy would attempt an amphibious landing in such treacherous conditions. They alert their coastal units to stand down, believing the weather has bought them another night of safety. As the dawn breaks on July 10, the wind miraculously dies down, leaving behind a choppy but navigable sea. Through the mist, the defenders on the Sicilian coast witness a sight that defies comprehension. The horizon is filled with an armada of nearly 3,000 ships, a steel wall stretching as far as the eye can see. This is the largest amphibious assault force ever assembled, dwarfing even the future landings at Normandy. The silence of the morning is shattered by the thunder of naval bombardment, as battleships and destroyers unleash a storm of high explosives onto the bunkers and pillboxes that line the shore. Operation Husky has begun, and the element of surprise is absolute. Allied troops storm the beaches of Gela, Syracuse, and Licata, bracing themselves for the slaughter they had been trained to expect. They run through the surf, rifles raised, waiting for the devastating counterattack of German panzer divisions. Instead, they are met largely by demoralized Italian coastal defense units who surrender in droves. The ferocious resistance that Montagu and his team had feared is strangely absent in the critical opening hours. The beaches, which should have been killing zones washed in blood, become busy logistical hubs. The soldiers push inland, marveling at their luck, unaware that their path had been cleared by a dead man floating in the Spanish tide weeks earlier. Back in Berlin, the confusion is palpable and persistent. Even as reports of the massive landings flood into the Wolf's Lair, the German High Command refuses to abandon the narrative of the briefcase. Hitler, clinging to the intelligence provided by Major Martin, insists that the assault on Sicily is merely a diversionary feint designed to draw German reserves away from the Balkans. He orders his generals to hold their nerve and wait for the real blow to fall on Greece. For nearly 2 weeks after the first boot hits the Sicilian sand, vital German reinforcements remain frozen in place across the Aegean, guarding against a ghost army that will never arrive. The absence of the 1st Panzer Division from the battlefield proves to be the decisive factor in the campaign. Had those veteran tank crews been present on the island, they could have driven the Allied beachheads back into the sea during the vulnerable initial phase. Instead, they are hundreds of miles away in Greece, watching the empty horizon. By the time the German High Command finally accepts the reality of the situation, it is too late. The Allies have established a firm foothold, offloaded their heavy armor, and secured the airfields. The window for a German counterstroke has slammed shut, sealed by the meticulous lies of British intelligence. The conquest of Sicily takes just 38 days. A lightning campaign that shatters the Axis alliance. The psychological blow of losing Italian soil triggers a political earthquake in Rome. On July 25, King Victor Emmanuel III dismisses Benito Mussolini, ending 21 years of fascist dictatorship. The Duce is arrested, and the Italian government begins secret negotiations for an armistice. The deception of Operation Mincemeat has not only saved thousands of lives on the beaches, it has effectively knocked one of the 3 major Axis powers out of the war. The soft underbelly of Europe has been ripped open, exposing the road to the Alps and beyond. Strategic analysts would later calculate the human cost of the operation compared to the projections. The planners had expected up to 10,000 casualties in the first week alone. The actual numbers were a fraction of that grim estimate. Thousands of young men who would have died in the surf of Gela or the hills of Catania lived to return home to their families. Ewan Montagu, monitoring the reports from London, feels a profound sense of relief that transcends professional pride. The burden of sending a dead man to war has been lifted. The gamble has paid off in the currency of living breath and beating hearts. As the war moves north onto the Italian mainland, the legend of Major William Martin begins to fade into the background of history. The German intelligence services, humiliated by the realization of the hoax, bury the details deep in their archives. It is only after the war, when the captured German files are examined by Allied historians, that the full extent of the deception is revealed. The letters, the photographs, and the reports from the Abwehr confirm that Hitler had swallowed the bait whole. The man who never was is recognized as one of the most successful intelligence agents of the entire conflict, despite never having drawn a breath of his own during his service. In the quiet cemetery of Huelva, the grave of Major William Martin remains a solitary vigil. For decades, it is tended by the British consular staff and the local Spanish workers who know nothing of the truth. They believe a brave Royal Marine lies there, a man who died for his country and left behind a grieving fiancée named Pam. The fiction is so powerful that it persists long after the war has ended. The headstone, paid for by the British government, bears the inscription Dulce et decorum, est pro patria mori. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. It is a final, ironic tribute to a man who died from rat poison in a London warehouse. It is not until the late 1992 that the British government finally reveals the true identity of the corpse. The man in the grave is Glyndwr Michael, a semi-literate, homeless labourer who had drifted through life as a ghost even before he died. He was a man ignored by society, a victim of poverty and mental illness, someone whose death would have passed completely unnoticed in the chaos of wartime London. Yet, fate and the machinations of intelligence selected him for a destiny grander than anyone could have imagined. The anonymity that defined his tragic life became the very shield that protected the Allied armies. In 1998, a new inscription is added to the gravestone in Huelva, finally giving a name to the hero. It reads, Glyndwr Michael, served as Major William Martin, RM. It is a belated recognition of a strange and silent sacrifice. The man who had no family, no home, and no future became the saviour of thousands. His body, rejected by the world in life, became the vessel for the most vital secret of the war. In the end, Glyndwr Michael achieved a form of immortality that few generals or statesmen ever reach. He serves as a poignant reminder that in the vast industrial machinery of global conflict, the humblest individual can still turn the tide. The legacy of Operation Mincemeat extends beyond the history books and military academies. It stands as a testament to the power of imagination and the importance of understanding the human mind. The British did not defeat the Germans in this instance with superior firepower or technology, but with a better story. They understood that Hitler, like all tyrants, was trapped by his own fears and desires. They wrote a narrative that fit his prejudices so perfectly that he could not help but believe it. It was a victory of psychological insight, proved by the silence of the guns on the Sicilian coast. Today, the grave in Spain is a place of pilgrimage for historians and travellers alike. They come to pay respects not just to a soldier, but to the idea of the unknown warrior in its truest form. Flowers are still laid on the stone, sometimes by the descendants of the men who landed in Sicily in 1943. These visitors stand in the warm Spanish sun, listening to the wind in the cypress trees, and contemplate the strange twist of fate that linked a lonely death in London to the liberation of Europe. The sea that washed him ashore continues to beat against the coast, a timeless witness to the deception. The story of Glyndwr Michael is a closing chapter on the nature of heroism itself. We often define heroes by their conscious acts of bravery, by the choices they make in the face of danger. But Michael had no choice. He was conscripted by death. Yet, his contribution is undeniable. He represents the millions of nameless souls who are swept up in the currents of history, whose suffering and existence are used by powers beyond their control. In remembering him, we acknowledge that victory is often built on the backs of the forgotten, and that sometimes the greatest deception is simply the mask of a uniform on a lost and lonely man. As the sun sets over the Atlantic, casting long shadows across the cemetery, the story of Operation Mincemeat concludes where it began in silence. The documents are now museum pieces. The secret agents have long since passed away, and the war is a memory. But the name Glyndwr Michael remains etched in stone, a permanent correction to the lie that saved the world. He was the man who never was. But in death, he became the man who mattered most. The waves of the Gulf of Cadiz continue their eternal rhythm, guarding the secret of the drift that changed the world.